Hello everyone, and welcome back to Super English Talks. I'm your host, Jara, and I'm so happy that you're here with me today. If this is your first time joining us, welcome. You didn't find this channel by accident. You're here because you want to grow, learn, and become a better version of yourself. And you're not alone on this journey. Here at Super English Talks, we share helpful and meaningful videos every single day. We truly believe that a little bit of knowledge shared with love can make a big difference in someone's life. So, if you're ready to take your next step, to learn something new, feel inspired, and believe in your own potential, then stay with us. Hit the subscribe button, and let's walk this path of learning and growth together, one day at a time. If you're an English learner who really wants to improve your listening skills and understand everyday English conversations, then you're in the perfect place. Today, we're going to talk about the amazing power of daily English listening practice. And I promise you, listening is not just about hearing sounds or words. It's about really understanding and connecting with the language in a way that feels natural and comfortable, almost like you're talking with a friend. We'll explore how steady and focused listening can truly change your English journey. With time and practice, you'll start to feel more confident, and you'll find yourself speaking more naturally and easily than you ever thought possible. So, please grab a cup of your favorite tea or coffee, get comfortable, and let's begin this exciting journey together. Let's make English listening a fun and useful part of your everyday life. Now, let's be honest, learning a new language can sometimes feel like trying to climb a tall mountain. At the beginning, everything feels exciting. You learn new words, you study grammar, and you make great progress. But then, after some time, you might feel like you're not improving anymore. That first excitement starts to fade, and you feel stuck. Many English learners experience this. Often, this happens when it comes to understanding spoken English. You might be good at reading. You might even write beautiful sentences and essays. Maybe you can even speak a little bit. But when you listen to a native speaker, maybe in a movie, a podcast, or a real conversation, everything can start to sound too fast. It feels like a mix of sounds, and suddenly, you can't catch anything. I remember one of my students, let's call her Anya. She came to me one day looking very sad. Her shoulders were down, and she said she felt like giving up. Anya was a great student. Her grammar was perfect. Her writing was clear and smart. She knew many words. But when it came to listening, she said her mind went completely blank. She couldn't understand what people were saying, especially when they spoke quickly. Does that sound familiar? I think many learners have had that same feeling. But here's the good news. This problem doesn't mean you're not smart or not talented. It's not about your intelligence at all. It's simply about training your ears and your brain to understand English as it's really spoken, not just as words from a textbook, but as a living, breathing language. Think for a moment about how children learn their first language. They don't open grammar books or memorize long vocabulary lists. They listen all the time. They listen to their parents, to their brothers and sisters, to people talking around them. They hear the same words and sentences again and again. And slowly, without even trying, they begin to understand. They learn the rhythm, the sound, and the meaning naturally through listening. Of course, adults learn differently. We study grammar, we read books, and we practice writing. But the main idea is the same. To really learn a language, you need to hear it often and surround yourself with it. The more you listen every single day, the more your brain gets used to the sounds, patterns, and expressions of English. And soon, you'll notice that you understand more and more without even thinking about it. So, if you want to improve your English, make listening a daily habit. Listen to podcasts, songs, or short videos in English. Don't worry if you don't understand everything at first. The most important thing is to keep going. Be patient with yourself. Every time you listen, you're training your brain a little more. Step by step, your ears will learn to catch the words. Your mind will start to recognize phrases. And one day, you'll realize that you can understand and speak English easily, just like you always wanted to. What often happens, sadly, is this. Many English learners spend too much time memorizing long lists of words or repeating grammar exercises again and again. But they don't get enough real-world English input, the kind of English you actually hear and use in everyday life. It's like trying to learn how to swim by only reading a book about swimming. You might understand the theory, but you'll never really learn until you get into the water. And for listening, getting into the water means hearing real English every day from different people, in different situations, and with different accents. That's what we call constant, varied, and real exposure to spoken English. Now, when I talk about daily English listening practice, I don't mean you have to study for many difficult hours every single day. Not at all. Even 15 to 20 minutes of focused listening each day can make a big difference. What really matters is not how long you listen, but how you listen. The most important word here is focused. You see, it's not enough to just have English playing quietly in the background while you're cooking or scrolling on your phone. That kind of passive listening can help a little. It can make you familiar with the sounds, rhythm, and tone of English. But the real improvement, the kind that helps you understand and speak better, comes from active listening. Active listening means paying full attention. It means really trying to understand the main ideas, noticing important words or phrases, and even guessing what might come next in the conversation. When you listen actively, your brain isn't just hearing sounds, it's thinking, connecting, and learning. You're not just hearing English, you're working with it. Let me tell you a story that shows this clearly. There was a young man named Kenji. He loved traveling, and his big dream was to take a backpack trip through many English-speaking countries. Kenji already knew some English. He could handle basic conversations, ordering food, asking for directions, or greeting people. But he wanted to go further. He wanted to feel comfortable and confident in natural, unplanned conversations, the kind that just happen when you meet people on the road. So, he started listening to our podcast. At first, he found it really difficult. He once told me, "I can only catch 1 out of every 3 words, maybe less." And I told him that's completely normal. Many learners start exactly like that. The important thing is not to feel discouraged. You just need to keep going. I advised him to take small, easy steps. Start with just 1 or 2 podcast episodes a week. First, listen all the way through once, just to get the general idea. Don't worry about every single word. Try to understand what the main topic is and what the speakers are talking about. Then I told him to listen again, this time more carefully. Pause often. Look up any new words or phrases you don't understand. Repeat parts that are tricky. This second, focused listening is where real progress happens. I explained to him that it's just like learning to draw. When you trace the same picture many times, your hand slowly learns the shapes and lines until it feels natural. Listening works the same way. Your brain needs to hear the same sounds and phrases repeatedly so that they become familiar and automatic. Over time, you start to recognize them instantly, without translating or overthinking. That's when listening begins to feel easy and natural. So remember, you don't need to study for hours every day. Even 15 or 20 minutes of focused listening can bring big results if you do it actively and with full attention. The key is to be consistent and focused. Make listening part of your daily routine, and you'll be amazed at how quickly your English understanding and confidence start to grow. It's not enough to just have English playing quietly in the background while you're doing something else. Sure, that kind of passive listening can help a little. It can make you more familiar with how English sounds, the way the words flow together, the rhythm of speech, the melody of the language. But if you really want to see big improvement in your understanding, you have to listen actively. Active listening means giving your full attention to what you hear. It means trying hard to understand the main ideas, catching important words or phrases, and even guessing what might come next in the conversation or story. When you listen in this focused way, you're not just hearing sounds. You're thinking, connecting, and working with the language. And that's where real learning happens. Let me share a story that shows this clearly. It's about a young man named Kenji. Kenji loved traveling. His biggest dream was to go on a long backpacking trip through many English-speaking countries, places like Canada, Australia, the United States, and the UK. He already knew some English. He could handle basic conversations, simple talks like ordering food, asking for directions, or introducing himself. But he wanted more. He wanted to be able to have natural, spontaneous conversations, the kind that just happen when you meet new people on the road. He wanted to feel comfortable, not nervous or lost. So, Kenji started listening to our podcast. At first, it was very difficult for him. He told me one day, I catch maybe 1 out of every 3 words at best. And I told him that this was completely normal. Every learner feels that way at the beginning. Listening is hard because your brain is still learning to recognize the sounds quickly. I told him not to feel bad or discouraged. Instead, I encouraged him to take small, simple steps. I suggested that he pick just 1 or 2 podcast episodes each week. He didn't need to rush or listen to everything at once. First, I told him to listen to an episode all the way through, just to get the main idea. Don't worry about understanding every single word. Just try to understand what the talk is about and how the conversation feels. Then I told him to listen again, this time more carefully. Pause often. Look up any new words or phrases that he didn't know. Repeat short parts to hear the pronunciation and rhythm. This kind of careful repetition, I explained, is extremely important. It's just like tracing a drawing again and again until your hand remembers the shape. For listening, your brain needs that same kind of repetition to recognize English sounds and their meanings. With time, those sounds start to feel familiar and natural. After a few weeks, Kenji took another step forward. He started using the written texts that come with our podcast, not as a simple dictionary, but as a tool for active learning. Here's what he did. He listened to a short section of the audio, then he read the text to see exactly what he had missed or misunderstood. Then, and this part is very important, he listened to the same section again, this time knowing what to expect. Sometimes, he even practiced something we call shadowing. Now, if you've never heard of shadowing, let me explain. Shadowing means you listen to a short piece of audio and then immediately try to say it at the same time as the speaker, copying everything, their pronunciation, their rhythm, their tone, even how their voice rises and falls. At first, it might feel strange or even a little silly, but it's one of the best ways to improve both your listening and speaking skills at the same time. Why? Because when you shadow, you're teaching your mouth and your brain to work together. You start to feel the rhythm of English. You notice how native speakers connect their words, where they pause, and how their voices change. This builds muscle memory for your tongue, your ears, and your brain. Kenji practiced like this for several weeks, short, focused sessions every day. And something amazing started to happen. He noticed that he didn't need to look at the written text as often anymore. The words that once sounded like one long, confusing stream now started to break apart into clear phrases and real meanings. He was finally connecting the dots in his mind. English no longer sounded like random noise, it began to sound like real communication. Then one day, Kenji sent me a message. I could feel his excitement even through the text. He wrote, "Jara, something incredible happened today. I was sitting in a coffee shop, and I heard 2 people talking near me. For the first time, I understood almost everything they said. I didn't need subtitles. I didn't translate in my head. I just understood it. That moment was a huge breakthrough for him, and it can happen for you too. Kenji's story shows that with focused, active listening, patience, and consistency, anyone can train their ears and mind to understand English naturally. So remember, don't just hear English. Listen to it. Listen with purpose. Listen with curiosity. And soon, you'll find yourself understanding and speaking with confidence, just like Kenji did. Kenji told me that even though he didn't understand every single word the people at the coffee shop were saying, he was able to understand the main idea of their conversation. They were talking about a new movie, and to his surprise and great joy, he even laughed at a joke they made. He wrote to me later, saying, "It was such a small thing, but for the first time in my life, I felt like I was in the conversation, not just listening from far away." It was amazing. That simple but powerful moment meant so much to him. And that strong feeling, the feeling of truly being part of the English-speaking world, is exactly what we want to help you experience. Learning English is not just about passing a test or memorizing grammar rules. It's about connecting with people, ideas, and the world around you. It's about opening the door to new experiences, opportunities, and confidence that reach far beyond the classroom. So, how can you make this kind of focused listening practice a real and natural part of your daily life? Let's break it down into some easy and practical steps that you can start using right away. Step 1. Listen to what you truly enjoy. The first and most important rule is this: find things to listen to that you actually care about. This point is so important that I want to say it again. You must choose something you enjoy. If you listen to something boring or something you don't really care about, your mind will quickly wander. You'll stop paying attention, and you won't get much benefit from the practice. But if you listen to something you love, your brain will stay active and curious. You'll want to understand what's being said. And when your heart is interested, learning becomes much easier and much more fun. So think about what excites you. Are you interested in technology? Then find podcasts, YouTube channels, or short videos that talk about new tech trends, gadgets, or inventions. Do you love cooking and food? There are so many fun English cooking shows and food-related podcasts that you'll enjoy listening to while also learning. Do you like true crime stories or mysteries? There are hundreds of English podcasts where people tell fascinating real-life crime stories. Or maybe you love movies, travel, or history. There's something for everyone. The more you truly enjoy the topic, the more you'll naturally want to understand it. And when that happens, learning doesn't feel like work, it feels exciting. Step 2. Start easy, then slowly challenge yourself. For beginners, I always recommend starting with materials that are made especially for English learners. These kinds of materials, like this very podcast, are designed to help you. We speak at a clear, steady speed, use simple words, and carefully choose topics that are both interesting and useful for you. Once you start to feel more confident and comfortable with listening, you can begin to move on to real materials, things made for native English speakers. This could include short news clips or reports, interesting documentaries, smart interviews with experts, or even short YouTube videos or vlogs on topics you enjoy. The key is to increase the difficulty slowly, not too fast. If it's too easy, you won't grow. But if it's too hard, you'll feel frustrated and give up. So find that sweet spot, a little challenging, but still enjoyable. Step 3. Use a simple, powerful 3-step listening method. Now, let's imagine that you've chosen a podcast episode or a short video that you want to practice with. Here's a simple but very powerful 3-step method that can help you get the most out of your listening time. Step 1. Listen for the main idea. Start by listening to the audio or watching the video once, without looking at any written text or subtitles. At this stage, don't worry at all about catching every word. That's not the goal yet. Your goal right now is just to understand the big picture, what the conversation is generally about. Try to figure out, what's the main topic? Who is speaking? What are they talking about? How do they sound? Happy, sad, surprised, excited, serious? Just focus on getting the overall meaning, the main message. This first listen helps you create a mental outline of the conversation, like a simple map in your mind. Later, you'll fill in the details more easily because you already know what it's generally about. For example, imagine you are listening to a short talk about someone's recent holiday. On your first listen, you might understand that they went to the beach. They enjoyed the local food, and it rained a little during their trip. Even if you miss some words, you already understand the main idea. That's what matters most in the beginning. Once you get comfortable with this first step, you can move on to deeper practice, listening again to catch details, reading along with the transcript, and shadowing parts to improve pronunciation and fluency. But remember, it all starts here, with focused, enjoyable, and consistent listening. You don't need to know the exact name of the restaurant or the specific kind of food they ate on that trip. For the first listening step, just understanding the general feeling and main activities is enough. Now, let's try a quick little practice together. I'm going to tell you a very short, simple story. Your job is to listen carefully just once and then think about what the main idea, the most important message is. Ready? Here we go. Story. Last weekend, my friend Emily decided to bake sourdough bread for the first time. She spent hours carefully watching videos online and reading many recipes, trying to make it perfect. But when she finally took the bread out of the oven, it was flat and dense, almost as hard as a rock. She was disappointed, of course, but also laughed at how funny her mistake was. Instead of giving up, Emily decided to try again next weekend, hoping that the next loaf would be lighter and softer. She's very determined to become good at this new cooking challenge. So, what's the main idea of that story? You probably understood that Emily tried to bake sourdough bread. Her first try didn't go well, but she's determined to try again. That's it. That's getting the main idea. You don't need to know exactly how many hours she spent or why the bread turned out heavy. What matters is that you understood the overall meaning, that she tried, failed a little, but stayed motivated. Now that you've practiced listening for the main idea, let's move to the second step, listening for details and words. This step helps you go deeper and get more involved in what you're hearing. Listen to the story again, but this time, feel free to pause, go back, and repeat any parts that seem difficult. This is your chance to notice and collect specific words, useful phrases, and interesting grammar that you might have missed before. If you hear a word you don't know, don't rush to look it up immediately. First, try to guess the meaning from the other words around it. If you really can't figure it out, then yes, look it up. And here's a great tip. Write down any new words or phrases that sound especially useful or interesting to you. You can keep them in a small notebook or even on your phone notes app. But remember, the goal is not to write down everything. Just focus on the words that seem important, common, or personally interesting. This is also a great time to practice something we've already talked about, shadowing. Do you remember what shadowing means? It's when you listen to a short piece of audio and then immediately try to say it exactly as you heard it. You copy the pronunciation, the rhythm, and the intonation. That means how the speaker's voice goes up and down. At first, shadowing can feel a bit strange or even funny, but don't worry. It's one of the best ways to improve both your speaking and listening at the same time. It teaches your mouth and your brain to work together smoothly in English. Let's go back to Emily's bread baking story again. I'll repeat it, and this time, try to listen carefully for specific words and phrases. If you want, you can even try shadowing repeat after me, copying my voice and rhythm. Story, second time. Last weekend, my friend Emily decided to try baking sourdough bread for the first time. She spent hours watching videos and reading recipes. The first loaf came out flat and very dense, almost like a rock. She was disappointed, but also quite amused. She decided to try again next weekend, hoping for a lighter, fluffier result. She's determined to master it. Did you catch words and phrases like sourdough bread, hours watching videos, flat and very dense, disappointed but also amused, lighter, fluffier, and determined to master it? Those are great examples of specific details that make your understanding deeper and richer. You may have also noticed the contrast between the words flat and dense from her first try and lighter and fluffier, her goal for the next one. Understanding these opposites helps you follow the story better and understand the emotions behind it. Now we move to the third and final step, listening for connection and reflection. This step is often forgotten, but it's actually one of the most powerful parts of real learning. Here's how it works. Listen to the story one more time, but this time, don't just focus on the words. Try to connect what you hear to your own life, your own feelings, or your own experiences. Ask yourself questions like, have I ever tried something new and failed the first time? How did I feel when that happened? Did I try again, just like Emily did? By thinking about your own experiences, you make a personal connection with what you're listening to. This helps your brain remember new words and ideas much more easily because they're now connected to your real emotions and memories. And that, my friends, is what makes listening practice not just useful, but meaningful. Now, think about this for a moment. How does this story or this piece of information connect to your own life? Maybe it reminds you of something you've done, something you've seen, or even something you've thought deeply about before. Can you summarize the main points of what you just heard, not by reading, but by saying them out loud or thinking them quietly in your head? Can you guess what might happen next in the story? Or imagine this. What kind of advice would you give to the speaker if you were talking with them face to face? This is the exact moment when real understanding begins. This is when you start to make the language your own. You are no longer just quietly listening and receiving information. You are now actively working with it, thinking about it, reacting to it, and making it part of yourself. Let's go back to Emily's story for a second. When you heard about her first failed loaf of sourdough bread, maybe you thought, oh, I remember when I tried to make pancakes for the first time and they all burned. You might smile or even laugh because you know exactly how that feels. It's frustrating when something doesn't go as planned, but it's also true that we learn so much from our mistakes. Or maybe you had another kind of thought. Perhaps you wondered, I wonder what recipe Emily used. Maybe she needs to try a different kind of flour to make the bread softer and lighter. When you think in this way, when you connect what you hear to your own life and experiences, you are not just learning English words. You are building a real, personal relationship with the language. This kind of deep, thoughtful listening helps the words and phrases stay in your memory. It turns English from being just a school subject into a useful, living tool, something that helps you connect with people and ideas in the real world. Now, let me share another real-life story that shows how powerful consistent listening can be. This story is about a man named David who moved from Germany to Ireland for a new job. David already had quite good English, especially for his work. His job mostly involved technical discussions and formal conversations, and he could handle those easily. But after work, when his Irish coworkers invited him to the pub or chatted during breaks, things became much harder. They spoke quickly, used a lot of local slang, and often made jokes that he didn't understand. David once told me with a shy smile, I understood every single word during the meeting, but when we went to the pub afterwards, it felt like they were speaking a completely different language. And honestly, this is something many English learners experience. You can know all the grammar rules and vocabulary, yet still struggle to understand real, fast, everyday English. Why? Because natural speech often includes idioms, expressions, and a rhythm that textbooks don't always teach. But David was not the kind of person to give up easily. He decided to face the problem directly and made a plan to improve his listening. He started a strict daily routine. Every evening, he listened to Irish radio shows and podcasts, especially ones that talked about Irish culture and history. At first, he found them very hard. He even admitted that he didn't understand most of what was being said. But he promised himself to listen for at least 30 minutes every single day, no matter how difficult it was. The most interesting part of David's approach was a technique I often recommend too, something called guessing from context. Instead of stopping the audio to look up every single word, he would listen carefully and try to guess the meaning from the words around it, the speaker's tone of voice, and the situation they were talking about. For example, one day he heard someone say, "He was absolutely wrecked after that long day." David didn't know what wrecked meant at first, but he noticed that the sentence mentioned a long day and the speaker sounded tired. So he guessed that wrecked probably meant something like very tired or exhausted. And he was right. That's what we mean by guessing from context. It's like solving a small puzzle while listening. This skill takes time and practice to build, but it's one of the most important listening skills you can learn. Because in real conversations, you don't have the time to pause and check every single word in a dictionary. David continued this routine for about 6 months. Every evening, without skipping a day, he listened carefully, guessed meanings, and learned naturally through context. And then something amazing happened. One day, while having coffee with his coworkers, he suddenly realized that he could follow almost everything they were saying, even the jokes. He still didn't understand every single word, but the general meaning and flow of their conversations were now clear to him. It felt natural. He was no longer standing outside the group, just listening silently. He was part of the conversation. He could laugh with them, respond quickly, and even add his own stories. David told me, "It's like my ears finally caught up with my brain." That's the power of consistent, active listening. It's not about being perfect. It's about showing up every day, staying curious, and letting your brain slowly build natural understanding. After a few more months, David began to notice something truly exciting. He was no longer just catching the main points of conversations at the pub. He was now understanding the little details, the quick jokes, and even the clever wordplay that used to completely confuse him before. He could finally follow the rhythm of natural, real-life English. He understood when people were teasing each other, when they were being funny, and when they were simply sharing stories. Even more amazing, he started to use some of the common Irish expressions himself, naturally and confidently, without thinking too hard. One evening, David told me with a huge, proud smile. Someone said, "The crack was mighty today, and I didn't just understand it." I knew exactly what they meant, that everyone had a great time, full of laughter and fun. A year ago, I would have just stood there staring, completely lost. That moment, my friends, perfectly shows the true power of steady, active listening. It is not only about understanding the words or the grammar. It's about understanding people, culture, humor, and the real connections that language creates between us. When you reach this level, English is no longer something you study, it becomes something you live. You start to feel the language in your heart, not just in your head. Now, the big question is, how can you make this kind of progress part of your daily life? How can you make English listening a habit that feels easy, natural, and even fun? The answer is actually simple. You need to fit listening smoothly into your daily routine, using the small bits of free time you already have. Let's think about your normal day for a moment. There are probably many times when you're doing something that doesn't need your full attention, moments that could become great listening opportunities. For example, when you're traveling to work or school. Maybe you spend time on the bus, in a car, or walking. Instead of scrolling through social media, why not listen to an interesting English podcast or audiobook? It's an easy way to turn travel time into learning time. When you're exercising, if you're running, stretching, or working out at the gym, put on an inspiring English speech or an interview with someone you admire. You'll be improving your English and your health at the same time. When you're doing chores at home, are you washing dishes, cooking, or cleaning? Those moments can easily become your daily English practice. Just play a short English story, a documentary, or even a motivational talk while you work. Even short waiting moments count. Waiting in line at the grocery store? Sitting on a park bench? Take out your earphones and listen to a quick 5-minute English clip. Every small effort adds up over time. The secret is not to force yourself, but to make listening feel like a pleasant, natural part of your day, something you actually look forward to, not something that feels like homework. Another wonderful way to make listening more fun and effective is through storytelling. You see, human beings are born to love stories. We remember ideas, facts, and words much better when they come wrapped in a story rather than a list of rules. That's why, on this podcast, we use so many stories because they help you feel connected to the language. When you listen to a story, your brain becomes active. You start following the characters, guessing what might happen next, and imagining the scenes in your mind. This kind of deep engagement helps your English listening improve naturally, almost without you realizing it. So, let me tell you a story now, one that's both fun and full of useful English. It's about a sweet old lady named Mrs. Higgins and her very unusual pet, a bright green parrot named Captain Squawk. Now, this is not a real-life story, but it feels very real. It was written to make you smile, to help you connect emotionally, and to give you lots of natural English expressions you can listen to, enjoy, and learn from. Mrs. Higgins lived in a very lovely, though perhaps a little too small, cottage right on the edge of a quiet and peaceful village. Her days followed a calm, familiar pattern. She spent her mornings knitting soft scarves with complex, colorful patterns, and her afternoons tending carefully to her beautiful garden, which was full of bright flowers and sweet-smelling herbs. But what truly made her cottage special was her companion, a lively, talkative parrot named Captain Squawk. Now, Captain Squawk was not an ordinary bird. He was a grand, emerald green parrot with feathers that shone in the sunlight and a voice that could be heard halfway across the village. He had once belonged to Mrs. Higgins's late brother, a retired sea captain. And from that brother, Captain Squawk had inherited not only his important-sounding name, but also a surprisingly large and sometimes slightly rude collection of pirate phrases. One warm and sunny Tuesday morning, Mrs. Higgins was out in her garden, carefully trimming her prize-winning roses. These roses were famous in the village. Everyone admired their deep color and wonderful scent. Captain Squawk sat comfortably on her shoulder, mumbling to himself in a low, rumbling voice. He often whispered bits of old sea songs and random pirate phrases like, "I me hearties," and "raise the sails." Everything was peaceful until suddenly a sharp, high-pitched cry broke through the air. It sounded frightened, like a small animal calling for help. Mrs. Higgins stopped what she was doing and listened carefully. The sound was coming from behind the tall hedge that surrounded her garden. With a frown of concern, she pushed aside the thick leaves and looked through. To her shock, she saw a tiny kitten tangled in the thorny branches. The poor creature was soaking wet, probably from the morning rain, and was shaking all over. Its fur was messy, and its little cries sounded desperate. "Oh, you poor dear," Mrs. Higgins said softly, her voice full of care and kindness. She immediately reached into the hedge and started working carefully to free the frightened kitten. It wasn't easy. The thorns scratched her hands, and the kitten struggled wildly in fear. Meanwhile, Captain Squawk reacted in a very different way. His feathers puffed out, and he shouted in his loudest voice, "Shiver me timbers! A landlubber! A vasty scurvy beast!" He clearly thought he was being brave and helpful, but his booming pirate cries only made the kitten more frightened, causing it to struggle even harder. Mrs. Higgins sighed lovingly. "Captain, please," she said, shaking her head with a small smile. "You are not helping at all." Finally, she managed to free the kitten and held it gently in her hands. It was cold, wet, and trembling. She could feel its tiny heartbeat racing fast. Without wasting a moment, she brought it inside her cozy little cottage, wrapped it in a soft, warm blanket, and poured a small dish of milk. The kitten began to drink slowly, its tiny tongue making quiet sounds against the bowl. Captain Squawk, of course, was watching everything with great interest. He hopped down from Mrs. Higgins's shoulder, walked proudly across the wooden table, and leaned in close to the kitten. "Ahoy there, little mite," he said in his usual grand voice. "Lost your ship, have you?" Mrs. Higgins couldn't help but laugh softly. To her surprise, the kitten stopped shaking for a moment. It looked up at the big talking parrot with wide, curious eyes. For a second, they simply stared at each other, a tiny, fuzzy kitten and a colorful, confident parrot, as if they were trying to understand what kind of strange creature the other was. Over the next few days, the kitten, who Mrs. Higgins lovingly named Pip because of his tiny squeaky meows, slowly began to grow stronger. He ate well, played with bits of yarn, and spent long naps curled up by the fireplace. He was still a little cautious around Captain Squawk's loud voice and sudden bursts of pirate speech, but he seemed to understand that the parrot meant no harm. And, surprisingly, Captain Squawk became quite fond of Pip too. He would often drop small pieces of dried fruit near Pip's bed and shout proudly, "Eat up, me hearty." Mrs. Higgins thought it was the funniest thing she had ever seen, a parrot feeding treats to a kitten. Then one bright afternoon, a very important visitor arrived at Mrs. Higgins's cottage. It was the mayor, Mr. Henderson, a tall, serious man who almost never smiled. He was known in the village for his strict and formal manner. He had come to discuss the detailed plans for the upcoming village flower show, the biggest event of the year. Of course, Mrs. Higgins's roses were expected to be the main attraction. Everyone agreed that her flowers were the pride of the community. Mrs. Higgins welcomed the mayor inside and offered him tea and a plate of fresh scones. They sat together in her cozy living room, talking seriously about judging rules, entry forms, and display arrangements. But while they were busy with their discussion, little Pip had other ideas. Now healthy, curious, and full of energy, he decided that this was the perfect time for a new adventure. Pip the kitten was feeling playful and curious that afternoon. Mrs. Higgins and the mayor, Mr. Henderson, were sitting in the cozy living room, having tea and talking seriously about the flower show. The mayor was sitting on a large, soft armchair, completely focused on the conversation. He didn't notice that a tiny pair of eyes were watching him from the floor, Pip's eyes. Quietly, Pip began to climb up the armchair. He moved slowly, one paw at a time, his little tail twitching with excitement. He thought this would be a great adventure. Captain Squawk, sitting proudly on his tall stand nearby, saw everything. The clever parrot tilted his head and gave Pip a knowing look, as if to say, "Ahoy there, little sailor, what are you up to?" At that exact moment, Mr. Henderson was saying very seriously, "And I believe, Mrs. Higgins, that your Crimson Glory roses will surely win first prize again this year. Their color and bloom are truly unmatched." But before Mrs. Higgins could answer, Pip suddenly jumped, a big, brave, and completely unannounced leap, straight onto the mayor's lap. Mr. Henderson let out a loud, startled yell. His eyes went wide, and he jumped up so quickly that his teacup flew from his hand and crashed loudly onto the floor, spilling tea everywhere. Good heavens! What on earth was that? He shouted, his face pale with surprise and shock. The poor man looked as if he had just seen a ghost. But before Mrs. Higgins could explain, Captain Squawk, excited by all the chaos, puffed out his bright green feathers and began to shout dramatically in his booming voice. Land ho! Abandon ship! The Kraken attacks! His voice echoed around the tiny room like thunder. The more serious the mayor looked, the louder Captain Squawk squawked. Mrs. Higgins felt her cheeks turn red. Oh dear, she said, rushing forward. She gently picked up Pip, who looked very confused and innocent, his little tail swishing nervously. Oh, Mr. Henderson, she said quickly, I am so very, very sorry. This is Pip, my new kitten, and that loud fellow is Captain Squawk. They usually behave much better, I promise you. Mr. Henderson, still breathing heavily from the shock, straightened his tie and tried to look calm again. His face slowly changed from anger to curiosity as he looked at the parrot sitting proudly on his perch. A kitten, you say? And a talking bird? He asked, blinking in surprise. Captain Squawk, now aware that all eyes were on him, decided to be on his very best behavior. He gave a little bow, fluffed his feathers neatly, and said in a polite, charming voice, a talking bird I am. And a fine lady, Mrs. Higgins. She saved the little creature, she did. A true sailor's heart. The room went completely silent for a moment. Then, to Mrs. Higgins's great surprise, Mr. Henderson began to laugh, a real, warm laugh that no one in the village had ever heard before. He looked at Captain Squawk with amusement. Well, Mrs. Higgins, he said, smiling at last, it seems you have quite a lively household. Perhaps we should think about adding a special prize this year, something like the most adventurous pet for the flower show. Mrs. Higgins laughed too, the tension finally melting away. The cottage, once filled with noise and surprise, now felt full of warmth and joy. She looked at Pip, who was purring softly in her arms, and at Captain Squawk, who looked very pleased with himself. She realized then that sometimes the most unexpected friends, even a noisy parrot and a mischievous kitten, can bring happiness and connection in ways we don't expect. They can make people laugh, soften even the strictest hearts, and remind everyone of the simple joy of being together. And Captain Squawk, never one to miss an opportunity, lifted one wing proudly and added, and a double portion of crackers for the captain. Wouldn't you agree, my friends? Mrs. Higgins couldn't help but smile. The mayor laughed again. The little cottage was filled with friendly voices and light, cheerful laughter. Now, let's look at some of the useful words and phrases from the story, made easy to understand. Tending to her roses, taking care of her beautiful flowers. Muttering to himself, speaking quietly and not clearly. High-pitched meowing, a sharp, high cry from a kitten. Matted and damp fur, wet and messy hair on the kitten. Cradling it, gently holding it softly and carefully. Puffed out his chest, standing tall and proud. A vast, ye scurvy beast. An old pirate phrase meaning, go away, you rough creature. Fond exasperation, being slightly annoyed, but with love. Hopped off, when a bird jumps lightly down from a place. Eagle eye, watching something very closely. Took a liking to, started to like someone or something. Boisterous pronouncements, loud and energetic statements. Pompous man, someone who acts too serious or important. Mischievous, glint, a playful or naughty sparkle in someone's eyes. Preoccupied mayor, a mayor who is busy thinking about something else. Dramatic leap, a sudden, big, surprising jump. Furry projectile, something soft and fast flying through the air, like Pip jumping. Clattering to the floor, falling with a loud noise. Good heavens! A common way to express surprise. regain his composure, calm down, and become normal again. Stern facade, a serious, strict outside look. Lively household, a home full of energy, sound, and activity. The parrot in the story, Captain Squawk, was very boisterous, which means loud, full of energy, and always making a lot of noise. The kitten, Pip, was mischievous, meaning he liked to play little tricks and cause small bits of trouble in a funny, harmless way. These words describe their personalities perfectly: a loud, proud parrot and a playful, curious kitten. When Captain Squawk proudly asked for a double ration of crackers, he was really asking for an extra treat, twice as much as usual. And when he said, "me hearties," he was using an old-fashioned pirate way of saying, "my friends." Even if you didn't understand every one of these expressions right away, you could still guess what they meant because of the story itself. That is the real power of context. The situation, tone, and actions in the story help you understand new words naturally, without needing to stop and look up every single one. For example, you could guess that mewing was the sound of a cat because it clearly described a kitten crying. You could also guess that pompous man was something negative because it said Mr. Henderson rarely smiled and acted too serious. All these clues help you find the meaning. This, my friends, is exactly what we call active listening. You are not just hearing the words, you are using your mind to figure things out, using clues from the story, from the speaker's tone of voice, and from what the characters do. This way of learning is much more powerful, interesting, and enjoyable than simply memorizing long lists of vocabulary. Now, let's move on to another important point: the importance of variety in your English listening practice. Podcasts like this one are excellent tools, but it's best not to listen only to one kind of audio. Your ears need to hear different voices, accents, speaking speeds, and topics so they can become flexible and strong. Real-life English comes in many forms, and the more kinds you hear, the better you'll understand people everywhere. Here are a few good types of listening to add to your daily routine. 1. Interviews. These are great for learning how people naturally talk with each other. You can hear how questions are asked and answered, how people interrupt politely, or how they agree and disagree. You can find many interviews on YouTube, maybe with famous people you admire, actors, scientists, or experts in topics you enjoy. 2. Documentaries. These are very helpful if you want to learn more vocabulary about specific topics like history, science, animals, or art. The speakers usually talk clearly and slowly, and they often use beautiful, formal English. Many streaming services have a large number of documentaries to choose from. 3. Audiobooks. Listening to a book read aloud can be a wonderful experience. You can close your eyes and imagine the story in your mind. It's best to start with a story you already know in your own language or a simpler book made for English learners. That way, you can focus on the sounds and rhythm of English instead of worrying about understanding every detail of the story. 4. News reports. Listening to English news helps you learn formal expressions and current vocabulary about world events. Choose well-known, trustworthy news stations. Many of them offer both audio and text versions of the news, so you can listen first, then read to check your understanding. 5. Conversational podcasts. Besides English learning podcasts like this one, it's very useful to listen to natural conversations between people. These podcasts often sound like two friends chatting about everyday life, food, travel, movies, hobbies, or even funny stories. They're full of real English, idioms, slang, and casual phrases. At first, you might feel lost or a bit confused when listening to these. That's normal. But if you keep listening every day, even for short periods, your brain will slowly start to notice patterns, like how people connect words, how their tone changes, and how sentences flow in fast, natural speech. Let me give you a real example. One of my students, Sarah, was preparing for a very important job interview at a large international company. Her reading and writing in English were excellent, but she was very nervous about the listening part of the interview. She was worried that she would not understand the different accents she might hear. You see, Sarah had mostly practiced with American English, but this company had workers from all over the world. In one meeting, she might hear a British accent, an Indian accent, or maybe even Australian English. She felt scared that she would not understand everyone clearly. So, I helped Sarah make a personal listening plan, a plan that included many different accents on purpose. She started listening to British podcasts in the morning while getting ready for work. During her lunch break, she watched short interviews with Australian speakers. In the evening, she listened to international news reports and a few casual conversations from Irish and Canadian podcasts. At first, it was very hard for her. She said, "I can't understand half of what they're saying." But she didn't give up. After a few weeks, she began to notice something amazing. She didn't need to understand every single word to understand the main idea. Her brain was learning to guess the meaning from context, tone, and rhythm, just like David did in the earlier story about moving to Ireland. This kind of varied listening is like exercise for your ears and brain. It might feel hard in the beginning, but the more you do it, the stronger and faster your listening becomes. Sarah began by listening to English from different countries on purpose. She listened to BBC podcasts to practice British English, CBC podcasts for Canadian English, and ABC podcasts for Australian English. At first, it was really hard for her. She told me later that during the first few weeks, it felt like her brain was tying itself in knots, trying to understand everything. Sometimes, she laughed about it because it really did feel confusing. But Sarah didn't give up. She followed her routine every day with determination. She practiced regularly and found ways to make her listening stronger. One method that helped her a lot was listening to short news clips from different regions and then summarizing them in her own words. She started by thinking about the story silently in her head. Then she tried saying it out loud, as if she were explaining it to a friend. For example, she might listen to a 2-minute news report about the world economy. After listening, she would imagine telling a friend, "They said the stock market went up a little because of new trade agreements." This way, she practiced understanding what she heard and also speaking it back. This is very important because listening is not just about hearing words, it's also about being able to use the language yourself after you understand it. When Sarah went to her real job interview, she faced a group of interviewers. One of them had a strong Scottish accent. In the past, Sarah said, she would have panicked and maybe even frozen. But because she had practiced listening to many different accents, she was able to adjust quickly. She focused her listening, understood the questions, and answered confidently. Because of this practice, she got the job. Her success was not just about knowing more words. It was about building listening strength, the ability to understand many accents, quickly adapt to different speaking styles, and respond in real-time conversations. So, how can you start building your own listening strength? One simple way is to practice with short, everyday stories. I'll give you an example now. Listen carefully for the main idea first. Don't worry about understanding every single word. Here's the story. Yesterday, I had a very funny experience at the grocery store. I was looking for a certain brand of olive oil, but I just couldn't find it anywhere. I walked up and down the aisles at least 3 times, feeling more and more frustrated. Finally, I decided to ask a store assistant for help. I showed him a picture of the bottle on my phone. He looked at it, chuckled, and pointed right behind me to a display I had completely missed. I felt a little silly, but we both laughed. Sometimes, the answer is right in front of you without even realizing it. Did you get the main idea? In short, someone was searching for olive oil in the store, couldn't find it, and it was actually right behind them the whole time. Now, let's look at some of the natural English expressions in this story. These phrases are commonly used in everyday conversation. Yesterday, I had this hilarious experience. Here, hilarious experience means something very funny. Saying "you know" at the beginning of a story is a natural way to start talking, as if you're speaking to a friend. I just couldn't find it anywhere. This means it was very hard to find. It's a natural way to describe a thorough search that didn't work. I must have walked up and down the aisles 3 times. This describes moving around the store repeatedly while looking for something. Feeling more and more frustrated. This shows a growing emotion, meaning she was getting increasingly annoyed or stressed. He looked at my phone and just chuckled. Chuckle is a small laugh, showing that the situation was funny to the assistant. By listening carefully and thinking about the story, you can start noticing how English is naturally spoken, not just written in a textbook. You can also practice repeating these phrases, imagining the situation, and even shadowing, repeating what you hear to improve both listening and speaking. This is exactly how Sarah practiced with different accents, and this is the same method you can use with any story, news clip, or podcast. First, understand the main idea. Then, pay attention to details and expressions. Finally, try connecting it to your own life or repeating it out loud. Step by step, your listening strength will grow, just like Sarah's did. A store assistant is the normal word for someone who works in a shop and helps customers. When someone chuckled, it means they laughed quietly, usually to themselves, often because they found something funny or a little surprising. In the story, the assistant pointed right behind me to a display I had completely missed. This means the olive oil was right there, but I didn't see it at all. I felt a bit silly, which is a natural way to say I felt a little foolish or embarrassed about the mistake. Then we both had a good laugh about it, which means we both found it funny and shared a small, happy moment. The saying "right under your nose" is a very common English expression. It means something is very clear and easy to see, but somehow you didn't notice it at first. Looking closely at stories like this and noticing words, phrases, and expressions is very helpful for learning English. It teaches you more than just the meaning of individual words. You begin to understand how English is really used, how the words feel in conversation, and what they suggest. This is very important for learning real-life conversational English. The main goal of daily listening practice is not to be perfect immediately, but to keep improving over time. Some days will feel amazing when everything seems easy and clear. Other days may feel frustrating, as if you are not improving at all, or even going backward. This is completely normal. Every learner experiences it. The most important thing is to keep going steadily and be patient and kind to yourself. Celebrate small wins, like understanding a new phrase or following part of a story. Don't get discouraged by small problems or temporary setbacks. Now, let's practice with another story. This one is a bit longer and will give you more chances to practice listening. It also uses feelings and common English expressions that are very useful for speaking naturally. This story is about my cousin, Leo, who had always been an amazing cook. He seemed to have a magical talent for making a fancy meal from just a few simple ingredients. His love for food was very strong and contagious. Anyone who spent time with him quickly felt his excitement. His kitchen was always busy, filled with the delicious smells of the meals he was preparing. This story gives you a chance to practice understanding the main idea, noticing details, and learning natural expressions. Even though Leo was an amazing cook, there was one thing that he was really afraid of: speaking in front of people. He could easily chat with a small group of friends about complicated recipes for hours. But the thought of standing in front of more than 5 people and talking made him very scared. When he thought about it, he would get cold sweats, his hands would get sweaty, and his voice would shake without him wanting it to. His mind would go completely blank, and he could not say anything, feeling flustered and nervous. One day, a special opportunity came for Leo. The local community center announced a culinary showcase. This was an event where amateur chefs from the area could show off their best dishes. Importantly, they also had to talk about their cooking journey and share their experiences. This was a great chance for Leo. He could show his love for cooking, get recognition for his talent, and maybe even find new customers for his small catering business. His wife, Maria, who always supported him and encouraged him, pushed him to sign up. "Leo," she said with excitement, "this is your moment. Imagine sharing your amazing duck confit with everyone in the community." Leo, however, started sweating just thinking about it. "Maria," he stammered, worried, "you know how I get. My tongue feels like sandpaper and my knees knock together. What if I forget everything I plan to say? What if I look foolish in front of everyone?" Maria was calm and practical, and she suggested a simple plan. "Leo, you are very good at cooking. Let's practice your talk every day for just 10 minutes. You can talk to me, talk to yourself in the mirror, or even talk to Captain the Cat if you want." Leo was doubtful, but he agreed to try. Every morning, after his first cup of coffee, he would stand in front of the bathroom mirror and practice explaining how to make his famous apple pie. At first, it was very hard. He would trip over his words, forget key points, and blush at his reflection, feeling very self-conscious. Captain, their grumpy old cat, would just sit and stare, flicking his tail as if he didn't care at all. Maria, on the other hand, acted as his supportive audience. She gave gentle corrections and lots of encouragement. "That was really great, Leo," she would say, helping him slowly gain confidence. Maria noticed that Leo was still speaking a bit fast, and she gently suggested, "Leo, try to slow down a little. Take your time. Or maybe you could share a personal story about how you first learned to bake this pie. That would make it more interesting." As the week passed, slowly but steadily, a small but very important change began to happen. Leo's voice, though still a little unsure, started to sound stronger and more confident. He began thinking more deeply about his topic, whether it was apple pie, duck confit, or another dish he loved. To his surprise, the words started to come out more naturally and easily. He realized that by talking passionately about something he truly cared about, the huge fear he felt each day was getting smaller. Each day it became a little easier to handle. Leo started trying new ways to explain complicated cooking steps. He used descriptive words and interesting comparisons to make his explanations clearer and more appealing. He was learning not just to speak, but to speak with style and confidence. Finally, the day of the culinary showcase arrived. Leo was still very nervous. His heart was beating fast, like a drum inside his chest. But as he walked onto the small, brightly lit stage, saw the eager faces in the audience, and took a deep, calming breath, something wonderful happened. He began to speak, not about his fear, but about his food. He described the crispness of the apples, the warmth of cinnamon, and the joy of sharing delicious food with others. To his surprise, he did not stammer, he did not blush, and he even told a few jokes that made the audience genuinely laugh. When he finished, the applause was loud and long, a clear sign of his success. People rushed to his table, eager to try his dishes and ask him questions about cooking. Leo realized that all the small, steady daily practices, even talking to a doubtful cat, had built not only his speaking skills, but more importantly, his self-confidence. He had not become a perfect public speaker overnight, but he had taken an important first step. His fear had not completely disappeared, but it had lost its strong power over him. This proved the old idea that steady effort, even if small, can lead to big changes in life. Leo's story is an inspiring example for all English learners who want to speak English easily. It teaches several important lessons. Even native speakers struggle with certain skills, like public speaking. It is not always about the language itself. Confidence is key. Sometimes the biggest barrier is fear of speaking, not a lack of words or grammar. Small daily practice adds up. Talking a little bit each day, practicing regularly, and making mistakes are all part of real learning. By learning from Leo, English learners can see that patience, consistency, and steady effort are far more powerful than worrying about instant perfection. If you ever feel nervous or worried about speaking English, remember this. Everyone feels nervous sometimes. It does not matter what your first language is. Even people who speak English as their native language can feel scared or worried when they speak in front of others. This is completely normal. Leo's story is easy to relate to because it shows a real human experience, feeling fear, being nervous, and then slowly learning to handle it. The story is also full of useful words and natural ways of speaking. These make the story vivid, clear, and interesting. For example, culinary prowess means having great skill in cooking. Whip up a gourmet meal means to make a fancy, high-quality meal quickly and easily. Passion for food was infectious means his excitement for cooking spread to other people. Kitchen was buzzing with delicious aromas shows that his kitchen was busy, good-smelling, and inviting. Shivers down his spine is a common way to show being very scared or nervous. Clammy hands means sweaty hands. Voice would tremble shows nervousness. Mind went completely blank means he could not think of anything. These phrases are very natural and make the story feel real. Maria, his supportive wife, encouraged him by saying, "This is your moment." This is a strong, common way to encourage someone to take a big chance. Leo's reply, "My tongue feels like sandpaper and my knees knocked together," is a funny and very clear way to describe how his body reacted to nervousness. Maria gave him a practical and humorous tip, "Talk to me, the mirror, or even the cat." This shows that any steady practice, no matter how small, is useful. The story describes his first practice sessions in detail. It was agonizing, which means very hard and painful. He would stumble over words, meaning he spoke awkwardly and made mistakes. He would forget transitions, meaning he could not move smoothly from one idea to another. He would blush furiously, showing embarrassment and self-consciousness. But then, slowly, a beautiful change happened. His voice grew stronger. His words flowed more naturally, and his fear became smaller. These phrases show that progress can be slow but real. On the day of the showcase, Leo's heart was thumping like a drum, meaning he was very nervous. But then, something clicked, a very natural phrase meaning everything suddenly made sense and became clear. The applause was deafening, and people flocked to his table, showing that he was very successful and warmly welcomed. The most important lesson from Leo's story is this: his consistent practice built not just his speaking skills, but also his confidence. This is a universal message. It does not just apply to public speaking, it applies to learning a language or any new skill. Steady, small effort can lead to big and life-changing growth. So, as you continue your English listening journey, remember these points. Make listening a daily habit, but don't force yourself to do too much. Even 15 to 20 minutes of focused listening each day is very effective. Pay attention to words, expressions, and how people speak naturally. Connect what you hear to your own life, thoughts, or feelings to make it stick. Little by little, your understanding, confidence, and English skills will grow. The key is steady effort, patience, and practice. Just like Leo, you can slowly overcome fear and become confident in English. Always choose things to listen to that you truly enjoy. If you are really interested in the topic, you will naturally want to understand it better and keep listening. Interest makes learning feel easier and more fun. Use the three-step method when you listen. Listen for the main idea. Understand the general story or message. Don't worry about every single word. Listen for details. Pick out important words, phrases, or grammar points that are useful or interesting. Listen for connection and reflection. Think about how the story relates to your own life, your experiences, or your thoughts. You can also use helpful tools to speed up your learning. Written texts can help you check what you hear, and the shadowing method, repeating what you hear as closely as possible, can improve both your listening and speaking at the same time. Variety is very important. Listen to different kinds of content, different accents, and different speeds of talking. This will make your listening skills strong and flexible. Real-life stories and real ways of speaking are especially helpful because they show how people actually use English. They help you notice small differences in words and expressions and understand natural everyday speech. Be patient and keep trying. Learning a language is a long journey, not a quick race. Celebrate every small success along the way. Don't get discouraged by mistakes or setbacks. Your brain is powerful and flexible, and with steady practice, it will naturally start to recognize patterns, guess meanings, and understand more of what you hear. Learning English is much like building a muscle. The more you practice, the stronger and more capable your brain becomes. Soon, you will find yourself laughing at jokes in English, following complex conversations with confidence, and feeling truly connected to the world of English speakers. Thank you very much for joining me today on Super English Talks. I hope this lesson has given you not only useful information, but also real inspiration and practical ways to make English listening a fun, daily habit. Keep listening, keep learning, and always remember, every minute you spend listening to English is a step closer to speaking it easily in conversation. Until next time, happy listening.